Good morning. How do I deal with this? Don't be disturbed. That's fine?
No, it won't be.
Good morning, colleagues. The Deputy Minister, Dr. Joe Pasha, the Presidential Advisor, Dr. Olive Shisano, and the Deputy Director General in the Presidency, Busani Ngaweni, the senior officials in the Department of Health, Dr. Anban Pillay, Dr. Nicholas Crisp, Dr. Aquina Tulare. We have apologies from the Director General, who is chairing the meeting of Directors General, what we call FOSAT, and therefore is not here. We have partners here. I will mention those that we've got on record here. I hope that if we miss anyone, we will be able to just update the record. But I want to acknowledge the presence of COSATU, Mr. Kwenema Namele, and other members. Yes, thank you. South African Communist Party, I have here Mr. Solima Paila, but I don't see him. I think someone else must be here. Okay. SANAC Civil Society, Mr. Mabalane Mfundisi. Yes, thank you. South African Medical Association, Dr. Angelique Kutsie. Thank you. Health Federation of South Africa, Professor Morgan Chetty. Representatives, you represent, okay. Independent Practitioners Association of South Africa, Dr. Elijah Ngosi. Wonderful. Life Hospital Group, Dr. Shri Virana. Thank you. Board of Healthcare Funders, Dr. Katleho Mutudi and others. Thank you. South African Optometric Association, Mr. Audience Maluleke. Thank you. Independent Community Pharmacy Association, Mr. Kolokolo Pasha. Thank you. Yes. Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Group, Dr. Stavros Nicolaou. Don't be shy, Nicholas. South African Medical Devices Association, Dr. Terence Moodley. Health Professions Councils of South Africa, Dr. Jose Letlape. Oh, yes. Mediclinic Hospital Group and Hospital Association. I don't have a name, but okay. Discovery Health. Yes, thank you. We'll get the name. If I've missed any, please don't feel offended. This is really more just to acknowledge that we are not alone as the department. We have here lots of friends of NHI, and so colleagues and all the stakeholders, members of the media, civil society. Good morning to everyone. The day we've all been waiting for has arrived today. The NHI, National Health Insurance Bill, is being introduced to Parliament. This brings us to one step closer to our goal of implementing the National Health Insurance and fulfilling our constitutional obligation to provide quality universal health care for all. The introduction of the bill to Parliament begins the vigorous legislative process where the Assembly, National Assembly, and the National Council of Provinces engage the bill in pursuit of the mandates as set out by our Constitution. The process encompasses quite a number of steps of engagement and re-engagements, including that of public consultations. As a department, we look forward to the robust debate That will surely come as far, that will surely come, and as far as we are concerned, all the hard questions only deepen the knowledge and understanding of the nation we intend to serve and sharpen our acumen for the policies we intend to implement. The bill will be available in both print and digital platforms. It is in Parliament, the Department of Health websites straight after this briefing. So you will have access to the bill as soon as we are done here. We know that it's going to be released from Parliament, but it will happen probably just as we are going on here. The objective of the NHI is to achieve universal access to quality health care services in the Republic in accordance with Section 27 of the Constitution through the establishment of the NHI Fund. It is based on the principles of social solidarity, where we look after each other in times of medical need. The comprehensive healthcare services the NHI will provide are bound by the philosophy of holistic approach to healthcare, spanning from preventative strategies all the way to convalescent and palliative care. For too long has our healthcare system operated in an unsustainable and unjust manner. The public healthcare system shoulders the lion's share of the disease burden in this country, looking after 84% of our population with less resources than the private health system that services only 16% of the population. The NHI seeks to optimize the available resources by pooling existing public funds and engaging the entire quantum of the sector so that in the end there is single purchaser of healthcare services. The NHI will benefit all South African citizens, permanent residents, refugees, inmates, designated foreign nationals, and all children, so long as the system is accessed at the appropriate level of entry and the correct referral pathway is followed. Services will be free at the point of care. The medical aid industry will have no trouble adapting to the changing environment, as they have successfully done in the past by developing financial products and services that provide complementary cover. All South Africans will benefit from the high quality of health care without the burden of out-of-pocket expenses. In the end, the combination of more disposable income in the pockets of South Africans and the collective investment in human capital will translate to increased economic activity and participation by our population, as many countries who have invested in universal health care coverage have demonstrated. And we make the point here that expenditure in health must never be seen as a wasteful expenditure, but must be seen as an investment into the healthier population and investment in human capital development and economic growth. An enormous amount of research over the decades has informed our implementation policies. The engagement of the bill in Parliament and with civil society will further inform and guide us as the department. You can then all rest assured that we will be attentive and energetic. We are not here to shy away from hard truths, but our intention is to absorb all the information and fix the system overall throughout implementation strategies. We do not lack in expertise or in resources, provided there is political will to tighten administration and societal will to collaborate. We can realize a sustainable goal of universal health coverage. As we have indicated at the beginning, the department here, as a department, we are not alone. I'm pleased that as we march towards this ideal with our friends of the NHI, we have here a number of representatives from various bodies who share this vision and will be with us. It doesn't mean that there are no areas of disagreements. There is plenty of space for engagements, debate, re-looking at various issues in terms of how we're moving forward. We're prepared to listen and debate all the issues, explain where we need to explain. So we want to thank all the partners who are here for your demonstrable commitment to social solidarity, and we look forward to working together in a collaborative manner. 2 weeks ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa signed a social compact with all the partners who are here, and therefore we have now joined our hands together as we march towards the establishment of universal health coverage and the fixing and improvement of our health systems, in particular ensuring good quality and access to all our members. We look forward to working together with all the partners who are in the health sector, both in terms of public and private, as we move on into the future. And we believe that for South Africans, this is a very, very important moment wherein we are taking a conscious decision to end the inequality in access to healthcare services, and we therefore believe that this bill is now opening the new era wherein this debate is going to be helping us to create the kind of healthcare services that our people really desire. We have met with many countries who have followed this path of national health insurance. They have assured us that the investment in national health insurance is actually the first step towards moving towards prosperity, and that you don't need to wait until you've got lower levels of poverty, higher levels of resources or wealth. Where you start, the country can only grow up further, and therefore we believe that South Africa should not lose any more time in taking this path towards universal health coverage. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be therefore requesting Dr. Anban Pillay to walk you through the content of the bill, what is in the bill. The slides will be made available to you after the presentation. The bill in its printed form will also be made available to you. In addition, we will share other information in relation to the national health insurance, and then for the members of the media, we will then be available to deal with the questions. We know that this is just the beginning. We're going to be having more and more engagements, questions, and so we will be ready for that. So at this point, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all the partners who are here, the members of the media who are here, and of course the presidency in the name of the war room in the presidency, led by Professor Olive Shisane, and with actually Mr. Busani Ngcaweni, who are running this whole team from the presidency. Between ourselves and the Department of Health, the presidency, there's a very strong collaboration and working together. We're basically one team. The impact of the war room has been that it helps us to mobilize all the other departments that we need to entrench a policy like national health insurance, and of course the Department of Health. We're all united in taking this program forward. So I want to say thank you very much, and would like to invite Dr. Anban Pillay to take us through the presentation of the contents of the bill.
Thank you, Minister. So my role today is to take you through the contents of the bill. You will receive copies of the bill as well, so you can go through it in detail. And so what I've done is summarize the key clauses in the bill that I think you may be interested in. So if I can start, the bill is intended to establish a national health insurance fund. And this fund is intended to basically purchase services on behalf of all South Africans. So the first step in the bill is to establish a fund. This fund will, the bill defines what these functions, powers and duties are of the fund. The fund will have to be governed by a board, and then the bill goes through exactly what the composition of that board will be, how the members will be appointed, the vice chair and the chair itself, and how members may be removed, etc. The bill then goes on to define who the beneficiaries of the national health insurance will be and how these beneficiaries will register with the fund. The bill also provides information relating to how providers, public and private, will be contracted in terms of services and how they'll be accredited, what type of services they will be able to provide, how the accreditation will happen. The bill also identifies the healthcare benefits that will be derived, not the exact benefits, but the process by which the benefits should be derived, and what the cost measurement options are and provisions relating to that. So in summary, the bill is divided into 11 parts. The first part deals with the purpose and application, then goes on to access to health services, the fund itself, how the board is established, and then how the CEO of the fund will be appointed, what committees the fund will have in place, the advisory committees that are linked to the fund, some general provisions that are related to the operations of the fund, a section on complaints and appeals, then financial matters about how the fund will access its funding and how that will be managed, and then finally a section that covers some of the miscellaneous issues in legislation. So I suppose to start at the beginning in terms of the purpose, the purpose is to establish this National Health Insurance Fund, and the fund will be funded through a mandatory prepayment system. And the intention is to provide affordable access to quality healthcare services for all South Africans. This piece of legislation will be applicable to all health establishments, excluding military health services and the Secret Service Agency. This act will be implemented in phases, and during the phased implementation, clearly the various functions of government will continue until a particular section is proclaimed. In terms of population coverage, the fund will purchase services on behalf of all South African citizens, permanent residents, refugees, inmates, and specific categories of foreign nationals that the Minister of Health and Minister of Home Affairs would agree upon. In addition, asylum seekers as well as illegal migrants will have access to emergency medical services, notifiable medical conditions, and basic healthcare services for children. In the case of foreign nationals, they would be expected to obtain some form of travel insurance, and where that's not possible, they would be able to pay for that on a cash basis. In terms of the registration of users, South Africans will have to register with their primary care provider where they will be accessing care. So all of us would identify who our primary care provider is, and we will register with that primary care provider and provide all our demographic details. That would include biometric information about ourselves. That primary care provider then becomes the basis on which the fund will contract with that provider. The users of healthcare services have a number of rights, and the bill identify those. First, that healthcare users have the right to quality healthcare services that must be free at the point of care. Information relating to the fund must be provided to healthcare users. The service benefits must be clearly available, and any other personal information must be protected so that that's not publicly available. No person is allowed to be refused access on unreasonable grounds, and access to care should be based on a reasonable time frame. Individuals have the right to make reasonable decisions about their health care. In the event that an individual is aggrieved with the way the service is being delivered, he or she may submit a complaint with the fund, and the fund will then provide responses to those individuals about their decisions. South Africans also have the right to purchase healthcare services that are not funded by the fund through complementary voluntary health insurance as covered by medical schemes. In terms of healthcare service coverage, all South Africans will enter through the primary care route and will be referred up the health chain through a referral pathway as a condition of their entitlement. The Minister will designate central hospitals as the semi-autonomous structures, which are government components, where they would operate independently of the national and provincial departments with semi-autonomy. Treatment will not be funded if there is no medical necessity, if it's not cost-effective, or is not included on the formulary. If the fund decides to decline a particular benefit, it must provide a clear reason and allow for an appeals process by individuals that may be aggrieved. In terms of the fund itself, which is Part 3, the fund is a Section 3A public entity, not a state-owned enterprise, as some may argue. A 3A public entity has particular rules in terms of the PFMA. Its functions include purchasing of health services and entering into procurement contracts for goods, for the timely reimbursement of providers, the determination of payment rates in a prescribed manner, appropriately funding healthcare services at various levels, monitoring the quality of services being delivered to South Africans, the performance profile of providers so that a pay-for-performance measure can be implemented, monitoring the impact of the fund in addressing healthcare needs, liaising and exchanging with information with various government entities, maintaining a national database of demographic and epidemiological data for the purposes of planning and service delivery, performing functions in a cost-effective and efficient manner, and funding should be aligned to the health policies that are approved by the Minister, and the fund has an overall responsibility to protect, promote, improve, and maintain the health of the entire population. The fund has powers to employ staff to purchase equipment and buildings and the like. It will be able to insure itself against loss, damage, and liability. In the case of legal proceedings, it has the right to defend itself. The fund will also be able to should be able to negotiate the lowest possible price for services as well as goods, and perform research relating to universal health coverage to improve access to care for all South Africans. The board, which is the governing structure of the fund, will be established, and this board will be accountable to the Minister of Health. The board will be made up of 11 members, and they have a range of expertise relevant to running such a fund. They would have a 5-year term, which is renewable once. There are clear conflicts of interest included in the bill where members would not be eligible for positions on a board. The Minister will appoint an ad hoc panel which would call for nominations to serve on the board. There will be public interviews of the board members, and the ad hoc panel will then make recommendations to the Minister on appropriate persons to potentially serve on the board. The Minister may remove persons from the board where he or she is performing inappropriately, or the entire board if the case requires. The Minister also appoints the chairperson, while the board will elect from amongst its members a deputy. In terms of the functions and powers of the board is the accounting authority in terms of the Public Finance Management Act. It should require to meet at least 4 times a year. It will advise the Minister on various matters relating to the fund, such as financing, administration, pricing, amongst others. The fund must conduct and disclose itself in terms of the interests that the members of the fund have and any paid employment and conflicts that may arise. The board will also determine its procedures. The remuneration rates and reimbursements of these members will be determined by the Minister of Health in consultation with the Minister of Finance. The fund has to also have a CEO, and this CEO must be technically competent and have the appropriate experience. The board will interview these candidates and make recommendations to the Minister on who would be an appropriate CEO. The CEO has a 5-year term, renewable once, and the board may recommend the removal of the CEO where he or she is not performing appropriately. The CEO basically runs the organization and will account to the board and perform all functions that the board assigns to him or her, and should run an efficient administration, including areas such as human resources and investigative unit, dealing with issues of fraud and corruption where they may arise. The fund should have specific units, including planning, benefits, provider payments, and accreditation, purchasing, contracting, payment administration, performance monitoring, as well as risk and fraud units. The CEO must prepare an annual report which will be presented to the Minister and Parliament, and the CEO should also be meeting with the Minister, the DG, and the Office of Health Standards Compliance at least 4 times a year in order to discuss matters relating to the fund. The board, in addition, may establish committees, governance committees that it sees fit in order to run an efficient organization. Additionally, the board has the flexibility of establishing technical committees where it considers this appropriate for the efficient running of the fund. All of these committees are subject to the standard governance provisions that are in the bill. In addition to the board itself, the Minister will appoint 3 advisory committees. From the comments that we received, there was much concern that the Benefits Advisory Committee and the Pricing Committee particularly may exert a significant influence over the way the fund operates. So these committees will report to the Minister, and the Benefits Committee, for example, will design the benefits of the National Health Insurance Fund, consider what are appropriate treatments, and make recommendations to the Minister, who will then advise the fund as to what the benefits should be relating to that. The Pricing Committee similarly must investigate the costs of delivering services, must investigate that, negotiate with the relevant suppliers, and make recommendations to the Minister on that. Each of these committees have the appropriate expertise in order for them to be able to deliver on these functions. There will also be a stakeholder advisory committee so that various stakeholders, from professional associations to labor to civil society and advocacy groups, would be able to engage with the Minister directly on the performance of the fund through the stakeholder committee and make recommendations on how the fund could improve its performance. All of these committees would have to disclose their interests and perform in the manner of all of the governance provisions I previously mentioned. In terms of Section 8, which deals with general provisions that are applicable to the fund, this section highlights the role of the Minister, which is governance and stewardship of the national health system, including the National Health Insurance Fund, the role of the department as well in terms of guidelines, norms, and standards, the human resource planning, development, production, and management, coordinating health services, planning and development of public and private health establishments, the integration of annual health plans, and then subject to Section 57, the Minister will introduce amendments to the National Health Act to delegate certain functions back to provinces, because you will see later in the presentation where we're making amendments to the way provincial powers are managed. We'll also designate categories of hospitals as autonomous legal units and establish the District Health Management Office as a government component. In terms of the role of medical schemes will remain as they are now, as voluntary organizations. Once the NHI is fully implemented, the Minister will introduce regulations that would limit the benefits to medical schemes to those services not reimbursable by the fund. In other words, what we call complementary cover. The District Health Management Office, which is a new structure, is a national government component that is responsible for managing, facilitating, supporting, and coordinating the provision of primary health care services for both personal and non-personal care at a district level, at a local district level. The CUP, or what's referred to as the Contracting Unit for Primary Health Care, which is a second new structure, is the preferred organization by which all of the providers of healthcare in a district will contract with the fund. This organizational unit will include district hospitals, clinics, CHCs, ward-based outreach teams, private providers within that specific area. This organization is responsible for understanding the burden of disease, accrediting both your public and private providers, getting involved in contract management, ensuring that the referral systems are working effectively, and integrating the health system at a local level between public and private providers and where the service is functioning. Then there is the additional structure of what we call the Office of Health Products Procurement. This office is responsible for setting up the procurement structure for all goods in the health system. That includes medicines, equipment, consumables, and the like. This office will be responsible for the selection, the procurement process, price negotiations, and contract management. It will support the Benefits Advisory Committee to develop an essential medicines list, an essential equipment list, amongst others, which will be part of the benefits. So the formulary that will be derived from the benefits list will be a recommendation from this committee. They will also look at new medicines and the evidence of treatment options and prices where those may be appropriate from time to time. Service providers that are delivering a service to the National Health Insurance must first be certified by the Office of Health Standards Compliance. Thereafter, the fund will accredit these service providers. The accreditation process looks at what are the minimum range of services that provider will be able to provide. Do they have an appropriate mix of the health professionals to deliver the service? The treatment protocols and referral pathways, and whether the provider will be able to adhere to that. The provider must provide information relating to the procedures that were delivered, the length of stay, if that's appropriate, referrals, and any other information the fund may be interested in understanding. It must adhere to the pricing regimen. It must also conclude a legally binding contract with the fund itself. There will be a renewal of this accreditation, which will be on a 5-year basis. If a provider is refused accreditation for some other reason, he or she may then be able to appeal to the fund, and there is a defined appeals process for that. There is an information platform for the National Health Insurance Fund to operate effectively and efficiently, and this platform must assist the fund to appropriately plan to deliver health services, monitor its budget, and adhere to guidelines. The personal information that is available within the health information platform remains personal information and confidential and will not be released by the fund. In terms of payment of providers, there are various payment methodologies. For primary care providers, they will be contracted and remunerated via the CUPs I spoke about earlier through a capitation system. Specialists and hospitals through performance-based remuneration and DRGs. EMS services, emergency medical services that is, will receive a capped case-based fee. The Minister will from time to time make regulations relating to the payment mechanisms that would exist. Coming to Section 9, which is complaints and appeals. Here the users of the fund may lodge complaints about the type of service they receive. These complaints must be lodged in writing, and the fund has an obligation to respond. Should an individual not be happy with the response of the fund, he or she may then lodge an appeal with the appeals tribunal which has been established. It will be 5 persons appointed by the Minister, and this tribunal has the powers of similar to that of a high court, and the intention here is to be able to resolve these matters in a speedy manner without the high costs that may be incurred in terms of going through the usual legal process. Going on to Section 10, which is financial matters. The bill goes to explain what are the sources of funding. Here the main source of funding is appropriations, which is from Parliament into the fund. And the chief sources of income for the appropriations are general tax revenue, funds that may be shifted from the provincial equitable share and conditional grants into the fund, a reduction in the medical scheme tax credits over time, the possible consideration of a payroll tax, as well as a surcharge on personal income tax, which the National Treasury will announce from time to time. The fund must be audited, and the Auditor General of South Africa is required to perform audits over the fund. The fund must produce annual reports about its financial performance as well as its performance in delivering services. These must be submitted to Parliament and the Minister, and the finances will be audited as I indicated by the AG. In terms of the Section 11, which is a miscellaneous section, it deals with the duties and powers of the fund. It provides for protection of confidential information of individuals, deals with offenses and penalties where this may occur relating to the fund. There is provisions relating to regulations that the fund may make. There are also provisions for directives. The NHI is intended to be implemented over a 7-year period from now. It planned to be fully implemented by 2026 through a phased implementation approach, and the bill identifies the 2 phases, which we are now in phase 2, and then there is a phase 3 thereafter. Phase 2 ends in 2022 and Phase 3 commences in 2023 to 2026. And the bill identifies the various steps that the fund must be taken before the NHI is fully implemented in its entirety. In order for all of this to happen, there is also a need for us to make amendments to various pieces of legislation. And the legislation includes 12 pieces of legislation, such as the Medicines and Related Substances Act, the Occupational Diseases, Mines and Works Act, the Health Professions Act, the Dental Technicians Act, Allied Health Professions Act, the Medical Schemes Act, Mental Health Care Act, the National Health Act, the Nursing Act, the Traditional Health Practitioners Act as well, and there may be other relevant pieces of legislation that we have not identified. It's important to also highlight the role of provinces under NHI. So the Department of Health will delegate to provinces as management agents for the purpose of provision of healthcare services. And in those cases, the fund will contract with those sections within the province, such as provincial hospitals or tertiary, regional, etc. The provinces will also be responsible for managing ambulance services. They will assist with the District Health Management Office in controlling the quality of healthcare services and facilities. They will also delegate provincial and regional hospitals and provide specialized services here. They will participate in the interprovincial and intersectoral coordination, collaboration of healthcare services, provide technical and logistical support to the district health councils, coordinate health and medical services during provincial disasters. They will provide pathology, forensic clinical medicine and related services, provide and maintain equipment, vehicles and healthcare facilities which would belong to them, consult with communities relating to healthcare matters, and overall promote health and healthy lifestyles, provide environmental pollution control services, and ensure there is health systems research and programs and public health sector services are functioning well. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pillay. I wonder if I could just get some help. I'd like the Friends of NHI logo up again, but I'm not technologically. I just like it up again.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. About 3 weeks ago, I was very fortunate to attend the BHF conference, and I see Zola's here. Where is she? There you are. Amazing lady. Amazing conference. I think just about everybody who is on this logo was there. And as everybody will see, these organizations, this cohort of organizations, comes from a very, very broad spectrum of our socio-economic topography. And I'm sure this must have been a difficult conversation to begin, but here we are with one voice saying one country, one healthcare system, universal healthcare for all. And so I would like to invite the organizations to come forward and give their statements in regard to NHI, in support of NHI. And I'll first ask from COSATU, Mr. Gwena Manamela, to come up, please. Thank you.
Good morning. Minister, Deputy Minister, delegation from the Presidency, partners and stakeholders, good morning once more. COSATU welcomes the release of the long-awaited NHI bill. The National Health Insurance remains the best vehicle to usher in universal health coverage. COSATU is happy so far about the progress made, although time has actually moved in terms of NHI implementation. We hope that the departments will prioritize its implementation and cover the lost ground. More healthcare users will now enjoy access, and we expect department to improve and increase human resources, both quantitatively and qualitatively. Improve security so that access is not only limited to 8 to 12 hours, but 24 hours a day, 365 days per annum. The South African health system is in urgent need of an overhaul in terms of its financing arrangement, management, and the ability to deliver quality healthcare services. There is general consensus that the health system is dysfunctional and that the quality of the health services is poor. Access to quality health services often depends on one's geographic location, race, employment status, income level, gender, and where the healthcare services are delivered, public or private health sector. The inequality in the financing and provision of health services between public and private sectors, as well as provincial and district variation, has detrimental impact in terms of the well-being of the population. COSATU, together with like-minded organizations, have on an ongoing basis called for the speedy release of the NHI bill as a step closer towards the realization of quality health care for many vulnerable groups. Unfortunately, a few organizations with very deep pockets continue to fund the narrative that the NHI is a threat to economic growth and jobs. This narrative, unfortunately, takes us backwards and denies the poor and the working class of their fundamental right to quality health care. President Ramaphosa is providing leadership and stewardship on the National Health Insurance implementation process and has reiterated the commitment of the entire South African government to overcome the two-tier health system. COSATU would like to take this opportunity to welcome the Minister's efforts to reorganize the Department of Health to support the implementation of the NHI, as expressed in the Minister's maiden budget vote as Health Minister. The NHI has the potential to massively reorganize the entire system and requires the National Department of Health as the custodian of national health policy to encompass the required capacity to provide policy direction to the provinces. COSATU further welcomes the initiative by the Minister to build capacity of managers to implement the national health insurance by utilizing bilateral agreements with countries that have made a national health insurance sustainable. This move will allow for the building of sustainable local capacity. COSATU further welcomes the establishment of a National Health Insurance Task Team at NETLEC that will be tasked to discuss the National Health Bill. This will allow COSATU and its affiliates to strengthen their calls for the implementation of the National Health Insurance as initially envisaged at the 2007 ANC Policy Conference and the 54th National Conference of the African National Congress. This process will allow social partners, including labor, business, community, and government, to have a closer look at finer details of the revised bill and receive clarity on the insertion of any new clauses. COSATU cannot emphasize enough the urgency in the implementation of the National Health Insurance in the face of the quadruple disease burden, as well as the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. As COSATU, we pride and count ourselves amongst the torchbearers in terms of the role that we have played over the years through our policy advocacy and mass-driven campaigns in advancing and defending the national health insurance and the cause of the realization of the right of access to healthcare services to all in line with Section 27 of our Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manamela. COSATU counts itself amongst the torch bearers. SACP, Mr. Zweli Mkhize, or was there somebody else to deliver the statement? Anyone from SACP here? Okay, that's all right, we can move along. SANEC Civil Society, Mr. Mabalani Mfundisi. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Morning, colleagues, Minister, my Deputy Chairperson at SANEC Civil Society Forum, all protocols observed. SANEC Civil Society Forum welcomes the release of the NHI bill and supports the objectives of the establishment of the NHI fund. Our submissions to the draft bill in September 2018 have been captured to our satisfaction. We are happy, we are in full support, and we are ready to engage in this journey as a We're happy, we are in full support, and we are ready to engage in this journey as society will debate this bill to ensure that it reflects the views of what universal health coverage should be in line with Section 27 of the South African Constitution. We would like to welcome the public consultations to be meaningful, but at the same time move with speed so that the national health insurance can be enacted as an act of parliament so that implementation can happen without delay. We do not want the engagement to happen longer than it is necessary, as some processes happen forever. We have called for the NHI, and we make this call now again that we want the NHI now. As civil society, we appeal to this parliamentary process should not be delayed in order to satisfy the private sector lobbyists or any lobbyists whose purpose is to delay, frustrate, or design ways in which to financially benefit from the NHI whilst the health provision does not improve. Parliamentarians serve at the behest of the people, and this parliament should ensure that before its current term ends in 2024, then NHI should long have been passed and enacted as an act. We do not want to see parliamentary capture. As SANEC Civil Society Forum, we have long called for the implementation of universal health coverage in South Africa. When the idea of national health insurance was introduced many years ago, and we may indicate that some of us were also delegates at the 2007 Mangaung conference of the ANC in our other lives, and it's 2019, 12 years, if not longer, Minister. We are ready, very excited that our call for universal health system will be realized. We didn't know that many years later, we would still be talking, advocating, and fighting for NHI instead of seeing it being rolled out. The delay, in our view, was as a result of two stumbling blocks. One, private sector that's hell-bent on maximizing profit by excluding the majority of South Africans, especially poor people, from accessing health services through, and we put in inverted commas, stealing the money meant for the public health system to subsidize private health system by sustaining apartheid-era medical aid tax benefits. This resulted in South Africa currently spending 8.5% of GDP on healthcare, with the private sector receiving about 4.4% of this GDP spent on 16% of the population. Secondly, government kowtowing to the whims of the private sector in the process, failing in its duty to ensure that Section 27 of the Constitution is implemented, which simply enjoins government to provide quality health care services to the population. This resulted in South Africa currently spending 8.5% of the GDP of healthcare on the public, receiving 4.1% and covering 84% of the population. However, we are happy, Minister and Deputy Minister, that government is now once more governing in terms of providing the NHI. The NHI is a platform to ensure that the spirit and the letter of the Section 27 of the Constitution and Article 12 of the United Nations Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights of 1966 are realized. Whether private sector is happy or not, Transforming the South African society requires that we put people before profits. SANAC Civil Society will continue to confront the highly racialized model of funding for health in South Africa, as we are doing in terms of HIV and TB response. We'll continue the fight against the system of funding that seeks to sustain an apartheid modus operandi that deepens inequalities along racial lines through patterns of development that restricts the lives of black South Africans. Communities must rise and confront Afro-pessimism agents, particularly those who have strategically placed themselves at the center of health service on behalf of communities, when in fact they are opponents of the values of the Constitution of South Africa and the agenda for sustainable development goals. A universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. As we conclude, the people, especially African poor majority, are most affected by HIV and TB, and they rely solely on the public health system for treatment. The NHI seeks to improve the support the public health system, and this will result in immense benefits for the people. With such an approach, we will see the people through their communities taking place at the front, the center, and the back of their health needs, and by extension, response to end HIV and TB. SANAC Civil Society, we call for the redirection of health financing and accountability through the NHI to address community systems strengthening. And as has been outlined, we are very happy that the move being taken is towards that direction. This goes beyond the challenges confronted by the narrow biomedical centered definition of health as pursuing the absence of disease and infirmity that is offered by the current health system, both public and private, through the administration of drugs, to be replaced by a broader community capacity enhancement based definition of health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. At the center of this approach, we see the NHI, and we are happy with the steps that are being taken. We are fully behind the ANC-led government, the President, you Minister, Deputy Minister, all progressive MPs. Ultimately, this will be enacted in Parliament, and the civil society formations that are involved in ensuring that we realize the NHI in our lifetime. We will use the power and influence we have to be active agents in this journey. We thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mfundisi. SANAC making a call to put people before profit. I would like to just pause and take a moment to acknowledge the presence of representatives from National Treasury. Without their buy-in, pun intended, we cannot proceed with this bill. So thank you very much to Dr. Blecher for being here. We really, really appreciate it. Dr. Blecher? Oh, he's left. Oh, well, he left before I could make my joke. Okay. I would like to invite South African Medical Association Dr. Angelique Kutsia to come forward, please.
Thank you, Program Director. Dear Honourable Minister of Health, Deputy Minister, the Presidency Delegation, all protocols observed. SAMA welcomes the release of the much-awaited NHI bill. SAMA acknowledge that as this is the beginning of a new dawn, there will be more questions than answers. It is all good and well to question, but there must come a turning point when one needs to put shoulder to the wheel and start working. Countries like Britain and Japan, to name but two, started implementing their equivalent of NHI under very difficult circumstances, especially financial. And South Africa will be no exception to this rule. The question is not whether NHI will provide better health care, but how the monies will be utilized as to secure funding for better health care. For South African citizens to enjoy quality health care, each of us has an obligation to ensure that we are part of this process. Quality health care with good patient outcomes starts at primary health care level with universal access to services. Communities, local municipalities, regional governmental structures, including Department of Social Development, and the health sector, under the guidance of a centralized Department of Health, need to be involved as partners on this journey. The recent launch of the South African Health Federation, under the leadership of Prof. Morgan Chetty, assists in soliciting partners and finances to improve healthcare by forming public-private partnerships or initiatives, which is a first for the South African health industry, and where, for the first time, Department of Health is willing to be part of, willing to join hands, and we applaud you for that. We, as South Africans, simply cannot sit back and expect Department of Health to do all the work and then blaming them for not getting it right. The Honourable President of South Africa already demonstrated his commitment with the signing of the Presidential Health Compact about 2 weeks ago. Department of Health is clear on their mandate that the upgrading, the waste, the abuse, fraud, bribery, the human capital of the public sector is their priority. Universal access will not be possible to our citizens if this is not sorted. Our current public sector needs this total makeover to ensure success, but we should not be fooled for one moment as to think that the private sector, especially the monthly medical schemes contributions, with a decrease in subsequent benefits, will be financially sustainable in future. It will not. We need an urgent reform in our health care as to ensure access to quality care where the patient-orientated health outcomes must be a priority. My plea to fellow colleagues and citizens is to let us all work together as to ensure a better healthcare future for our children and the rest to come. Sama, thank you, Minister, and our previous Minister of Health, for not having given up on a difficult and much criticized bill, of which Sama supports fully. In conclusion, to quote Mother Teresa, let us touch the dying, the poor, the lonely and the unwanted, according to the graces we have received, and let us not be ashamed or slow to do humble work. For not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. On behalf of SAMA, the Unity Forum of Family Practitioners, I thank you all.
Thank you very, very much. I would love to reiterate that quality health care with good patient outcomes begins at primary health care. This cannot be overstressed enough. Prof. Morgan Chetty from the Healthcare Federation of South Africa sends his apologies. Unfortunately, was not able to make it. However, I do understand there is a representative here. Yes, but I do have Prof. Chetty's statement. May I read it out? Yes, okay. So I'll just read out Prof. Chetty's statement then. The Healthcare Federation of South Africa is supportive of the initiative for NHI in South Africa. The Independent Practitioners Association in South Africa fully supports and endorses the need for universal health care NHI in South Africa. Our support was demonstrated on the 21st of July 2019 at the ICC in Cape Town when we launched the Healthcare Federation of South Africa. The private sector is a large sector in South Africa. However, the private sector, when viewed on its own, is fragmented, lacks accountability, and lacks a collective voice. We believe the NHI offers the opportunity for partnerships between the public and private sector to address the healthcare needs of all South Africans. As an approach, and if structured well, these partnerships hold tremendous promise for pulling in resources and expanding capacities beyond what the public sector and any one development agency can do on its own. With these reasons and more, both public and private sector players are paying greater attention to partnerships as the way for developing countries to achieve universal healthcare and to meet important sustainable development goals. The NHI recognizes the critical role of the private sector providers and other actors. The NHI recognizes the critical role that the private sector providers and other actors can and must play in public health, particularly at the state and local level. We have a number of members that are in the private sector, but are not big multinational organizations. The Private Healthcare Federation is a formalized platform of all healthcare stakeholders who will work with governments to deliver healthcare to all citizens via the NHI program. The emphasis is that this must be a partnership and not a private solution to a public problem. The concept of the Federation and its role as a partner with government to implement UHC has been endorsed by the Secretary of Social Affairs of the African Union, Her Eminency Amira El Fadil, and by the National Department of Health in South Africa. We believe in multi-stakeholder collaborative program with constructive dialogue will promote progress. It is a journey that we want to be part of, and we want to pledge our support to a successful implementation of the National Health Insurance. This initiative is being coordinated with the participation of all stakeholders and is being led by Professor Morgan Chetty. And that was the message from Professor Morgan Chetty from the Healthcare Federation of South Africa. Collaboration is the name of the game there. All right. I would now like to invite Independent Practitioner Association of South Africa, Dr. Elijah Nkosi.
Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister, plus all dignitaries, I would like to say a good morning and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. The Independent Practitioner Association of SA, which is called IPAF, is a national network of family practitioners that comprises of the South African Medical and Dental Practitioners, which is called SPNet, plus NHC, plus SAMCC. These independent doctor groupings formed IPAF in 2005. Our purpose then, and it's still relevant now, was to ensure that our members provide quality health care in a cost-effective manner. We are registered as an NPO, and we have contracts with medical schemes and medical schemes administrators. We have more than 5,000 family practitioners in our network. We actually cover the entire country, I would say, from Sea Point to Guyana. As a company, we believe in leading from the front. We have our directors serving in some of the structures that are working on assisting to bring change in the healthcare industry and in ensuring that NHI succeed in this country. We have a director who is a board member of the Office of Health Standard Compliance, and we've got two other directors who are serving in the technical committee, in the technical team of this office. We also have a director serving in the PMP, in the CMS PMP Review Committee. I'm serving in the Section 59 committee that's looking at racial profiling and alleged fraud in the medical industry. As IPEF, we are saddened by and challenged by the fact that in the current system of healthcare delivery in our country, about 8.5 million people are covered in the private healthcare system, whilst the better part of the population, about 45 million people, are not covered. We believe that this is not sustainable, and we also believe that access to quality healthcare is a constitutional right. Therefore, as a national doctor network, we fully support the passing of the NHI bill. We welcome and fully support the principle of universal health coverage as proposed and covered in this bill. We have been engaging our members for the past few years and informing them about NHI. We believe that in most of the regions where our members are, they are ready to participate in the rollout of this system. IPEF, through the international exposure of our chairman, Prof. Mokencheti, as it has been said, has been instrumental in the formation of the Healthcare Federation of SA. This initiative was conceptualized last year, in Rosebank, in the Federation of Africa Health Business Conference. We invited a number of stakeholders in the medical industry, and it was eventually launched in Cape Town 2 weeks ago. We are eager to learn from the other regions in the continent where they have these federations. In conclusion, IPEF is fully committed to the principles of NHI. We fully support our government and the Ministry of Health in these initiatives. We are echoing our President's theme of Tumamina and Kauleza. We are ready to roll up our sleeves and to prepare our doctors to fully engage this principle of increasing access to quality health care in the broader population. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nkosi. IPEF members are ready to participate in NHI, so no one can say that doctors don't want to opt into the scheme. Life Hospital Group, Dr. Shrev Rana.
Good morning, Minister, Deputy Minister, the other senior representatives. I stand here humbly because I think many of you have dedicated your careers and your lives to the well-being of us as South Africans, so I thank you for that. I don't have, as you can see, a written statement, because for me today was not about what gets published eloquently in the media tomorrow. It was about expressing a commitment. And in that sense, for me, I wanted to share on behalf of Life, our board, our leadership, but most importantly, my colleagues, our staff, a deep-seated sense of obligation and commitment to drive universal healthcare. Most of you won't know, but we in 12 countries outside of South Africa, more than 12. And in almost all of those, universal healthcare models are our norm. It's what we know, it's what we work with, it's what we've been committed to for multi-decade. And partnering in that sense with whichever aspects of government has become what we're familiar with, and as I expressed, something that we work comfortably in because we recognize the importance, and never to make it sound like a cliche about access to care. More importantly, access to, let me say it, affordable care and quality care. That's something that we understand. I think within our context, and I say our as a South African, this is about 60 million people. And in that sense, I'll use the word commitment a lot, and I'll often ask the question, which is not about debate, it's not about the dialogue around the bill, it's around how can we help? Because this is much needed, and this has been a discussion or a debate for far too long. So today our language is about action and a statement of we here in that sense. Locally, we've already looked at primary healthcare models that are innovative, that are saying, How does it create access for 60 million South Africans? How does it shift the price point of care? And the reason for that is de-linked from the publishing of the bill today. It's about this is the right thing to do, and I end with that. So not a long, well-articulated positioning statement, but more a commitment of we recognize the need for national health models, and you let us know how we can support. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Verana, for that impassioned pledge of commitment by Life Hospital Group. I have worked at Life Hospital Group, and I can definitely vouch for the group that primary healthcare and quality healthcare delivery definitely forms part of their fundamental principles as a group, and it was a pleasure to actually work for the group. Thank you very much. We would like to move on to the Board of Healthcare Funders, Dr. Katlego Mthudi.
Thank you, Dr. Lwazi. Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, representatives from the Presidency, senior managers of the Department of Health, we are grateful for this opportunity to show our support in the published bill. I would like to first congratulate all the stakeholders that have been involved in the process to this date, from the War Room and the ministries involved. And this is indeed a momentous occasion, and we are proud to be part of it. In 2009, the directors of BHF passed the resolution to support NHI as the vehicle to deliver universal health coverage for the people of South Africa. This was largely because the intent resonated with the BHF's own vision, which is really a health system that is centered around the needs of the health citizen, a system which is affordable and provides higher quality care. Secondly, we thought it was the only way to contribute meaningfully to a process from within, other than being critical from outside. We have thus, through the various iterations of the bill and the policy papers, participated actively and continue to conscientize our membership and the industry at large of the content of the policy. We are acutely aware that the state of the entire South African healthcare system is in dire straits, and it would need more than just the passing of or publishing of the bill to be corrected. We also thus see NHI as part of a component of a revolution of health reform. And these other interventions include, I won't be able to articulate all, for example, the WHO pillars of a healthcare system, which has got 6 components. One of them is financing, which talks to initiatives like NHI, but there are issues around service delivery, health workforce, health information systems. And we were very pleased when we listened to the budget speech earlier this year, and there was commitment of certain funds to areas like infrastructure, because that is what a lot of people have been articulate about, fixing other areas. So we are acutely aware that NHI is but one of the processes of correcting the ills of our system. And these initiatives and commitments are also largely covered in the 9 pillars of the Presidential Health Summit Compact, and to a very large extent are also addressed in Chapter 10 of the National Development Plan. So we see it as part of the process of actually correcting the entire system. The BHF further believes that for our health system to thrive, we need certain elements. One is that of a strong and positive leadership, and this is not just pertaining to state, but also for us that are operating in the private sector. The second element is that of sector cohesion. We have talked a lot about the ills of a fragmented health system, that it's wasteful and not progressive. unless we get those two elements correctly, we will continue to flounder. We thus welcome also the invitation from the Ministry of Health as well as of the Presidency to foster collaboration between state and non-state entities. This will actually help to harness existing pockets of excellence in pursuance to the establishment of a true integrated health system. We further submit that for a well-functioning healthcare system, and that system is actually the necessary catalyst to the economy of a country, and not the other way around. So we cannot wait until we fix the country's other ills before we contemplate implementing NHI. I am thankful, Minister.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mutudi. Speaking of harnessing pockets of excellence between the public and private sectors. Very exciting. Would like to invite South Africa Optometrics Association, Mr. Audience Maluleka. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Program Director, Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister, senior officials within the Department of Health, colleagues and all other guests, and as Mabalani has said, protocols observed. Not used to protocols. I would like to also indicate that I did not come alone. I'm sent by my newly elected president, Mr. Dolas Buluka, who is also present here. The South African Optometric Association, as an official representative body for the professions of optometry and dispensing opticians, on this auspicious occasion, we would like to express our gratitude and excitement as we enter into an era where the majority of our citizens who do not have the means to afford health care will now start to benefit, as we are aware of the triple burden of or challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. From our perspective, the principle of moving together, leaving no one behind, are in accordance with the ideals of universal health coverage. We believe that it is through partnering with various and relevant stakeholders and role players within the healthcare system that will achieve a seamless and successful implementation of the NHI. This will address the historical imbalances of the healthcare system, where only the affluent can be able to afford what is known as the best healthcare system, and where the majority of the poor rely on the overburdened public health care system. We also see this as representing of an opportunity for government to tap into excess capacity and resources within the private healthcare sector to deal with the burden of disease. As primary eye care practitioners, optometrists and dispensing opticians will have a positive impact on the South African population by introducing interventions which would result in early detection of vision and eye condition, as well as preventable blindness. As we know that research has shown that 80%, up to 80% of visual impairment can be preventable if detected early. And to that end, research has shown that myopia, which we know as short-sighted, is a growing epidemic in the world, with an estimation of 50% of the world expected to be short-sighted by year 2020. This then calls for us to be proactive in combating this in the face of the fourth industrial revolution and the increased use of technology in order to avert this unthinkable. We are very supportive of the integrated school health program and health promotion efforts of proactive and preventative health care to the school-going children. We do not underestimate the growing incidence of non-communicable diseases as well as lifestyle diseases that impact generally on everything. As the Optometric Association, Honorable Minister, we are enlisting the support of the implementation of the NHI, and the compact that you and the rest of the stakeholders have signed some 2 or 3 weeks ago demonstrates the commitment that various stakeholders, including ourselves as practitioners, are enlisting to supporting the efforts of government to providing universal health coverage as espoused in Section 27 of our Constitution. Once again, we are ready as the profession to support the efforts that the department and the government is putting to making universal health coverage a reality in South Africa. I may add, in our lifetime. We are cognizant of the fact that there are areas of disagreements in terms of how certain things are done, and I think it has been through the dialogue and interactions that has taken place over the many years that we see ourselves where we are pledging support for the successful implementation of the NHI. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, when I was an emergency physician and I'd call the ophthalmologist, they'd always say, oh no, just give the patient this and this and this and I'll see them on Monday. I didn't know you guys were so busy. Now I know that no, you weren't sitting there watching TV, that you were actually very busy out there in the community. And I'm sure that optic medicine is going to make a huge difference in the Integrated Health Schools program. I would like to invite the Independent Community Pharmacy Association, Mr. Mokgolo Pasha.
Thank you, Lwazi. Minister, Deputy Minister, the delegation from the Presidency and from the Department of Health, all colleagues, I greet you this morning. Independent Community Pharmacy Association, ICPA, represent over 1,200 members. We also represent over 2,000 pharmacists and over 20,000 support personnel in the country. As ICPA, we would like to congratulate Parliament and the Minister of Health on the release of this NHI bill. Healthcare is a human right as it's been enshrined in the Section 27 of the Constitution. It is a widely accepted international principle. This right should not depend on how rich one is and where one lives. The right to obtain health care, as it is in our Constitution, and NHI represent the funding mechanism to realize this right and to address the inequalities of the past. Both public and private healthcare sectors currently face immense challenges. The former is overburdened and severely resource constrained. The latter is rapidly becoming unaffordable and inaccessible to the majority. A massive reorganization and realignment of both sectors is urgently required to actively deliver on the promise of universal health coverage. After all, Minister, the wealth of the nation hinges on the health of its people. One will struggle to achieve good economic outcomes without great health outcomes. We believe that the NHI will indeed address this anomaly. ICPA offers all our support to NHI. Our members are willing and they are able to assist the health department to offer quality pharmaceutical services to all South Africans. Our pharmacists are dedicated and they are ready to provide accessible primary healthcare services. Minister, the bill indicates that the public will enter the primary healthcare service, will enter the NHI through primary healthcare services. Pharmacy and independent community pharmacies in particular avail ourselves because we are the providers of the primary healthcare service. We avail ourselves for that entry and we are committed. Our members have given us a mandate of commitment to provide this primary healthcare service as an entry into the NHI. Minister, on our road to NHI, we believe that as the bill indicates a number of legislation that needs to be amended, a key or a very first one that needs to be amended is the Skewed Medical Schemes Act, which really has the makings and the smell of apartheid era legislation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mokgolo. I'd like to invite the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Task Group, Dr. Stavros Nicolaou.
Thank you. I always say optometrists can see things a lot more clearly than us, so I'm going to try and match that. Firstly, may I acknowledge the Honourable Minister of Health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, his Deputy Minister, Joe Patla, members of the Social and Health Cluster in the Presidency, and all other invited guests and dignitaries. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm here representing the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Task Group, which is an umbrella constituent organization representing all 5 pharmaceutical industry associations. These include the Black Pharmaceutical Industrialists Association, the Generic and Biosimilar Medicines Association, the Innovator Pharmaceutical Association of South Africa, Pharmaceuticals Manufactured in South Africa, and lastly, the Self-Care Association. Why have I taken the time to detail each of these? I think it's important that we reflect that the PTG represents more than 97% of the total pharmaceutical industry in South Africa. On the back of that, the PTG welcomes and supports the prioritization that our President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, is placing in both improving and making healthcare more accessible to all our citizens. We also welcome, Minister, the collaborative approach that both the Presidency and the National Department of Health are adopting with the private sector, more recently expressed through the Presidential Health Compact, which brought together all key stakeholders in the healthcare system through the Social Compact. Equally, Minister, the PTG welcomes the release of today's long-anticipated NHI bill, which is an important element to our country achieving universal coverage and setting out to achieve optimal healthcare outcomes for all our citizens. The bill, we believe, also recognizes, and I need to stress this, because I stress it because of where our country currently finds itself and where the economy finds itself. So the bill recognizes the importance of healthcare to our economy. As a healthy nation is a critical success factor to improving both productivity and global competitiveness for our country. To this end, and in closing, the PTG and the South African pharmaceutical industry at large looks forward to partnering with government, and more specifically the National Department of Health, in ensuring sustainable business models that are able to appropriately support government's efforts at ensuring secure, affordable, and accessible medicine supply as a viable and affordable NHI system unfolds. Whilst it may be true that there are some differences between the private and the public sectors in some of the detail that relates to the NHI system, we are encouraged by the collaborative approach that Minister Mkhize and his team have adopted, and we remain both confident and optimistic that the appropriate balance will be struck between ensuring optimal health care on the one hand for all our citizens and sustainable healthcare businesses on the other, remembering, of course, that the pharmaceutical industry presently services both the public and the private sectors. I conclude, Minister, by adding that the PTG supports the call to Tumamina, to be sent, and to Kaoleza in working together to achieve what our country and its citizens richly deserve, and that is the best healthcare outcomes. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nika. PTG recognizing that investing in quality healthcare into a nation has positive outcomes for the economy at large. I'd like to invite South African Medical Devices Association representative Dr. Terence Mondley.
Thank you, ma'am. I was wondering if I was still going to make the cut. My name is Dr. Terence Mudley, and I'm here with a prepared statement. I don't have the confidence of Dr. Varana to speak off the cuff. I represent the South African Medical Technology Industry Association, and like everyone else here today, we are honored to be present and to welcome this week's release of the National Health Insurance Bill. Personally, I see this as a very momentous occasion in the history of our country, to the point that I actually changed travel plans to make sure I was here this morning. SAMED specifically is committed to continued engagement with the Department of Health and other stakeholders in the ongoing development and implementation of the National Health Insurance Act. SAMED represents about 200 medical technology companies that are involved in the continuum of healthcare, both in terms of prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and rehabilitation. SAMED recognizes the inequities of the current fragmented healthcare system, and we view the proposed NHI as a crucial element that can assist South Africa in advancing universality and social solidarity as the pillars of a people-centered health system that does not discriminate along economic lines. The tabling of the bill here today follows last week's annual conference at SAMED, where Dr. Anban Pillay was present at a special session on NHI, and where he called on the medical technology industry to remain an active participant in the NHI process. SAMED has actually been an active participant in the NHI process since its inauguration. We have reviewed and made submissions on the white paper, on the green paper, and the NHI bill, commenting where we felt appropriately knowledgeable on issues such as procurement, reimbursement, governance, and accreditation. We furthermore hold additional regular member workshops where we try to ensure that our members, stakeholders, understand and manage the developments as we pursue our vision to build a sustainable medical technology industry that enhances patient access to innovative solutions. This year, SAMED joined Business Unity South Africa, through which we contributed to the Presidential Health Compact, notably in the area of strengthening supply chain management. In conclusion, I'd like to say, Minister, that SAMED is an eager partner in the mission to improve the nation's healthcare and healthcare outcomes, and will continue to mobilize support within our sector and the broader society for universal health coverage through the National Health Insurance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Before I invite Dr. Jose Letlape to come up from HPCSA, I do, not wanting to be left out, have a couple more organizations that may or may not wish to make statements, but certainly would like to be acknowledged as friends of the NHI. But I'm just going to call out so that if formal speech has not been prepared, then you have Dr. Jose Letlape to take some notes from, and maybe if we call you out, then you might be prepared to come up and make a statement. We have Mr. Rolly Base from Mediclinic Group here. Thank you, sir. We have Dr. Mandi Mzimba from Discovery Health Group. Thank you. We have a representative from the World Health Organization, Dr. Rajesh Narwal. Rajesh? Is he still here? Okay. And then we have from MedScheme, Mr. Nkosi. Is Mr. Nkosi still here? Yes. From CMS, we have Nondumiso Kumalo, Ms. Nondumiso Kumalo. And then we also have from HASA, Matthew Pryor. Yes. Okay, so I will first ask HPCSA Representative Dr. Jose Letlape to come up, and then I will offer the podium to our other speakers. Thank you.
I guess it's good that you clap before I start, because you might not be so inclined when I finish. The Honorable Minister, the Deputy Minister, all the dignitaries at the table, all protocol observed. You'll see that on the slide, there's only one statutory regulator. So I'm not here representing only the HPCSA. We have other partners that we have been working with through this process, all the other councils, the Pharmacy Council, the Nursing Council, Traditional Healers Council, Allied Health Council, and Dental Technicians Council. So there are other regulators in the mix. Now, I was told it's 2 minutes. I've been delighted to see that it looks like it's an open-ended time at the mic. Now, I will start with the formal speech that comes from the organization, and I will then take the liberty to ad-lib. Now, the role that the HPCSA sees itself playing, we are a regulator and we support NHI by ensuring quality assurance for universal health coverage and enforcing professional codes of conduct and ethics anchored on universally accepted principles on natural justice. And in our duty to enforce ethical conduct, we will not compromise. Whatever shareholder pressures are put on us, we will ensure that we uphold that. The contracting of private healthcare providers through providing input on the GP contracting model, as well as advocating and proper regulation of private hospitals. Now, the key issues that we talk about contracting, and we hope as we engage with the NHI bill, we will persuade the authors to talk about NHI contracting with providers rather than accrediting them. Because there are other structures that have been doing the job of accrediting professionals for competence to practice. And we also would not want to get into the CON debacle of yesteryear, so that we're able to take everybody along, so that people know that you can be a bona fide accredited provider but not have a contract with NHI. Because we don't want terms that might label people that you are not accredited. It looks like there's something wrong with your professionalism. So we hope there will be scope to engage on those matters. We also want to ensure the human resources for health as a key component and driver of universal coverage of health by ensuring that there are adequately qualified professionals trained and registered that meet the needs of the country by effectively carrying out its mandate of providing for control over education, training and registration for and practicing of health professions registered under the Act. We are also embarking on ensuring that the curricula are appropriate for the needs of the country, and we're not training for OECD countries. So we'll ensure that primary health care is embedded in the training, and that the training platforms that we accredit are expanded training platforms that include primary health care facilities and clinics and practices in that training platform. The involvement of the public in ensuring the success of the NHI is critical. And thus, as the HPCSA, we commit ourselves to engage the community in dialogues so that people should know their rights and responsibilities. A successful NHI is dependent on focusing on health rather than on disease. And it is important that communities and citizens know that they carry a responsibility to lead healthy lifestyles, to reduce the burden on the health systems. We also commit ourselves to improving and utilizing ICT to ensure that what we do is much easier for the members that we deal with. In all of the above, the HPCSA and its professional boards commits to ensuring that the professions at the HPCSA and in other statutory bodies contribute to the effectiveness and success of the NHI. I would just like to remind all of us that when the president launched, he told a story of the president of Sweden sleeping next to a coal miner in the same ward. Now, there can be no universal health coverage without solidarity. So the task of dismantling apartheid health is an urgent task. And it cannot be deferred for one day longer. Because we then become complicit and become the new architects and proponents of apartheid in health. We have been giving testimony about the challenging working environment in the private sector for practitioners that register with us. They are also challenged in the public healthcare sector. But the providers are better off in the public health sector, where there's assurance of a salary and you can budget properly and you can be a healthier provider. The private sector is a minefield. It's mafia land, where practitioners, despite working, are not sure the check will come in from the medical aid. And they get profiled by medical aid. Practitioners are confused because every medical aid has its own 1,200 options. Everybody is creating their own codes. Patients are complaining that practitioners don't know the codes. But every day somebody comes up with a code of their own or rejects a code that is out there. Now, there can be no NHI with two statutory funds. So there has to be decisiveness. If we are creating NHI as a fund, there should be clear communication that there's a phasing out process of the other statutory fund called medical aid. And there's a 2-3 year convergence program that we embark upon. Otherwise, we're lying. And I just want to remind you, I have a dear friend that was buried a few weeks ago. Dr. Mkhize knows we seem to be burying each other now. And Dr. Tulo wrote in 2008 that the travesty of justice and honesty is when people that wished you dead are pallbearers at your funeral. And I hope in the Friends we do not have potential pallbearers of the NHI. And this is not an environment where we can trust. There can be no NHI without solidarity. And the reforms towards NHI have to start today with a clear message. You know, this message of, at the end, the medical aids can't cover what we cover as strapsukis. We need boldness. And this is for sound political leadership to say there will be no 2 statutory funds. And that needs to be clearly articulated, because when you get out there, that's the question that people ask us. They say, Khosi, you've been talking NHI. What about my medical aid? We need to be able not to be ambiguous and say, when this takes off, the seed funding for NHI has to be the resources that lie in the medical schemes pooled with an act of parliament. And there should be no apologies about that, because this is a chance to get rid of capture. We talk about human resources, Minister. There are many healthcare professionals that have learned that it is difficult to earn practicing your profession. So they've gone into the economic pockets. Administrators, managed care organizations, vigilante fraud prevention schemes, to hound those that practice, to interfere with the professional autonomy of those that practice, to defile the core values of the professions, of putting patients first and professional autonomy, where you get told what you can do, what you can't do. And the caution, Minister, about accreditation of providers is we don't want the NHI to become the new medical aids that are creating DSPs, that are choosing who can live and who can die without the expensive education that we have given them. DSP is an abomination. It's an unethical practice. And there will be no one left to support NHI if we do not dismantle this financial tyranny created by an act of parliament signed by the Minister of Health. Dr. Mkhize, you have the power to make the things better. Dr. Mkhize, you have the power to accelerate this program to not a 7-year wishy-washy program. Let's follow the Nike motto, just do it. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tlhape. When Dr. Tlhape speaks of DSPs, I remember that pain of turning people away, not because they didn't have the funds, not because they didn't have the medical aid, not because we could not serve them, but because this was not your DSP. Totally ridiculous. Mr. Rowley Base, Mediclinic Group, yes, sir? Okay, but we acknowledge your presence and thank you very much for being here with us. Dr. Mandi Mzimba. Yes, ma'am? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Minister, Deputy Minister, and your senior managers. Everyone, as I was standing up, they're wishing me luck to speak after. Allow me to apologize for my CEO, Dr. Bromberg, who could not be here, but I have a brief message of commitment from him. We welcome the publication of the NHI bill, as this provides more clarity on the implementation of the policy objective of universal health coverage and the establishment of the NHI fund. We support the drive towards ensuring that all South Africans have access to quality health services based on need rather than affordability, and we welcome the Minister's collaborative approach in working towards this objective. We are working through the detail in the bill. We've only just seen it this morning, but we do know that we have the skills and experience which we hope will be incorporated into the implementation process. Our high-level view is that there is a workable framework and that an incremental implementation strategy is appropriate, as this will ensure the feasibility and affordability are balanced while making progress towards universal health coverage. It is important that the initial focus is on the priority projects where there are vulnerable groups in dire need of improved access to healthcare services, such as the areas of cancer treatment and the areas of mental health. The NHI fund will be an important enabler for harnessing private sector collaboration. We also support the focus on primary and preventative care as the foundation of UHC. Other than that, there are a number of detailed elements in the bill which we'll need to clarify, and we look forward to working constructively with the Department of Health to obtain this clarity and to contribute to implementing an effective NHI framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mzimba. World Health Organization, Dr. Rajesh Narwal, has he... Oh, you here? Yes, okay.
Thank you, Program Director. Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, dignitaries on and off the dais. I was not prepared for any statement per se, but I would like to say that, and I'm speaking on behalf of the WHO representative, that WHO strongly supports the government efforts on move towards universal health coverage, which is an overarching target for the Sustainable Development Goals as well, and also enshrined in South Africa's constitution in section 27. Having said that, there is no single path to universal health coverage, and all countries choose their own path and pace. NHI, we see, is South Africa's vehicle for universal health coverage, and so we strongly support NHI bill. And there were some anomalies. We also submitted comments. We are working very closely with the Department of Health and the government on making things work the way they should work based on the global experiences. The question now is, there are a lot of critics of NHI and a lot of critics of how funds will be managed when there is a lot of corruption, systems are not great. But the global experience suggests that you don't wait for the systems to be perfect. It's through the NHI, it's through the universal health coverage reforms that systems learn. And all the countries, including, we have a good example from UK, there is Thailand, there is Turkey, there is Chile. All countries start somewhere. So we are also not starting at zero in South Africa. We are already on a path to universal health coverage, but it has to be accelerated, and NHI is a good vehicle for doing that. But there are certain key principles for NHI and universal health coverage as well. First and foremost is investing in strong health systems which have primary health care at the heart of it. And we clearly see in the CUPs that it's talking about gatekeeping and strengthening the primary health care, without which universal health coverage could be very inefficient, as we've seen the example in the US, where they are spending 17% of their GDP and yet only 50% of people are covered, right? So we don't want to go that way. So we need to have strong primary healthcare systems. The second principle is about social solidarity. My colleagues, Khosiret Lape spoke very eloquently, but I cannot speak that eloquently, but social solidarity indeed is very, very critical. So it's about rich cross-subsidizing the poor and sort of young cross-subsidizing the healthy and sorry, I'm mixing words maybe, but so it's about cross-subsidization, it's about social solidarity. The third principle is about having efficiencies in the system. You don't have a bottomless pot. You have to spend, have to be allocatively efficient, and you have to be technically efficient. So doing the right things at the right cost. That's the whole mantra. And probably NHI through its strategic purchasing will be able to bring this in. I wouldn't take much time, but I would like to say it's a great move. It's literally a milestone after milestone. There was a compact signed 2 weeks ago, which lays out the roadmap for UHC, and now there is an NHI bill going to the Parliament. WHO stands very, very strongly to support the government in the next steps. Thank you very much.
Milestone after milestone for South African healthcare. What a time to be alive. Mr. Nkosi from Med Scheme. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, senior officials, senior government officials present here today, and guests, good morning. Mine is a very short input. MedScheme, as part of the Afrocentric group, welcomes the publication of the NHI bill, and we congratulate the department on this very important milestone. We look forward to engaging and working with government on the path to achieving universal health coverage through the phased implementation of NHI. And we would like to thank government for the opportunity that this provides, in that we will be engaging with the contents of the bill, and we are certain that it represents an important, the beginning of an important era for our health system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council for Medical Schemes, Nondumiso Khumalo. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, senior managers from Presidency and the National Department of Health. CMS is fully supportive of the implementation of NHI, and the work that we do around the implementation of NHI is actually nested within the Medical Schemes Act, Section 7, and we see this as a progressive move towards realizing what sits within Section 27 of the Constitution. Our support for national health insurance started a long time ago, and it was pretty much based on the observations that we've made in the industry in terms of health-seeking behavior, billing behavior, quality health outcomes, and the types of complaints that we receive in the industry. So we've made submissions to the Green Paper, White Paper, and the NHI bill. We fully support the following principles: social solidarity, the principle of justice, fairness, equity, efficiency, as clearly outlined by WHO, both in terms of technical and allocative efficiency. Again, this is based on what we've seen in the industry, specifically with regards to issues related to efficiency and effectiveness. We also support the principle of appropriateness and affordability, which then leads to access to quality health care for everybody in the country. We see the implementation of national health insurance as a step closer towards addressing many issues that have been highlighted in the health market inquiry. And some of those issues relate to the fragmentation of the funding as well as the delivery of care, which in certain instances has forced certain people into poverty, whereby some members of the medical schemes have been forced to sell assets such as their homes, etc., to be able to afford medical schemes cover. So So basically today, our support for NHI has been clearly articulated in the submissions that we've made, and we wish the department well as the presidency as they move forward with the implementation of national health insurance.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, would like to invite Mr. Matthew Pryor from the Hospital Association for South Africa, which encompasses the Mediclinic Life Netcare groups as well as the National Hospital Network.
Good morning, and thank you, Honourable Minister and Deputy Minister, for the opportunity to give you a message from HOSA. We represent approximately 80% of the private hospital beds in the country, and we'd like to congratulate you on the publication of the NHI bill. We look forward to engaging with the detail thereof, and we thank you, Minister, for providing the basis for a robust discussion, which I'm sure will follow the publication of the bill. We commit to positive engagement with the bill, and we understand that there are years of work that have taken in order to complete this task, and we congratulate the officials that have worked arduously on this task. Our commitment to solutions in healthcare is grounded in our belief in collaboration and our belief that we can collectively overcome the challenges that we all face. After all, we are all South Africans, and overcoming challenges is what we do. We are committed to the core purpose of universal health coverage, ensuring access to quality healthcare for all South Africans. And on behalf of HASA, therefore, we are supportive of the objectives of the NHI bill, not just in words here today, but in providing our thoughts, our insights, our research, and our resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of those messages of support. Let no one be pallbearers, and let everybody be torchbearers. So we are going to move on to our question and answer session. It is now 11:20. Minister does need to leave at past. I promised some people telephonic interviews, which they may need to fall away. So if you are watching on the live stream, I am very, very sorry, but we would very, very much like to engage those who are here in the house, and then we will try and see if we can squeeze in those telephonic interviews at the end. Just a reminder that WhatsApp questions can be sent to Tahera at 083 777 3330. We will take, I will take a round of 3 + 1 WhatsApp questions at a time, and I see the hands are already shooting up. So can I just get to my notes section so that I can make notes? To prompt Minister should she forget. We do have an entire panel of a very, very strong management team. Please do feel free to direct your question to whomever you may feel could answer your question appropriately. It does not necessarily need to just be Minister. And I will now take the first round of questions. If I can just ask a favor, if you could just state your name as well and which publication or organization you're from. So there was a hand up here, 2 hands, 3, and then Tahera, do you have a question? And then 1 question from Tahera. Thank you.
Good morning, Alex from News 24. Just thought I'd note that I see discoveries here. I hope NHI will approve my medication for chronic and not turn it down like Discovery did. And then on that, there's just 2 questions I wanted to ask. The first question relates to the registering at facilities. Will members of the public have to register to a facility within the area, or can they choose a facility obviously in the, within their city, or does it have to be something that's closest to possible to where they live? And the second thing is, I do notice a lot of members of the public have been making comments, and I thought I'd put it to you guys. You might be best to answer. But given the current climate, looking at what's happened to all the SEOs in this country, a lot of members of the public seem to feel that this will just become another feeding trough for the corrupt. So perhaps if you can answer how you guys will diligently look after these funds and not allow it to be another failed entity. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Minister. My name is Ofense from SABC TV News. I'd like to ask about the issue of funding. I know South Africa allocates a big chunk of the GDP to health, but it doesn't translate in terms of our longevity, in terms of our lifespan, as compared to the counterparts that actually spend less on health, yet the citizens actually live longer. So I'd like to find out, will the NHI actually translate into seeing better health and long-living South Africans? Thanks.
Thank you. Minister, it's Pranesh Naidu from Bloomberg News. Can you please tell us just how much it's going to cost to fund the NHI from start to finish? And at which stages you're expecting these funds to be unlocked and how much?
Tyra, if I may ask you to read out. Yes, please. Oh, it's already been asked. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay. Thank you. So we'll start with Alex's question. In terms of registration facility, can you choose where you're going to register, or will you be obliged to register at your own area? And the second question, is this another feeding trough for corrupt government entities? Dr. Pele, will you answer the first question? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Excuse me?
No, okay.
Okay, all right. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just move these mics.
So what now? Okay. The first question around facility registration. So the NHI providers. Oh. Or should I go there? So healthcare facilities will be evaluated by the Office of Health Standards Compliance and Certified. The fund therefore thereafter will do an accreditation, and South Africans will then choose the health facilities that are available. They may choose that based on their proximity to their home, proximity to their work, etc. So that will be a decision that people would make as to where they would like to go. It's usual that people choose health facilities close to their home, but I mean people could certainly change that. Minister, if I could, I can try and answer the question on the costing. So the question around the costing, the National Treasury had published in the white paper of the NHI what they estimated the cost of the NHI to be. They estimated that to be 256 billion. That's what's in the white paper. They plan to release a revised paper with the revised costing around that. The approach in the initial phases is that there will be a transfer of funds from the conditional grants that are currently used to fund services through the conditional grant approach into the NHI fund, as well as movement of funds from the equitable share into the NHI fund. So initially, government will not be raising taxes in order to fund the NHI, but using the funds that are currently available more efficiently to do so. It's only in the final stages that Treasury indicated in their white paper that they would actually be introducing any form of taxes. Even in their model around taxes, if you look at it on Chapter 7, their model looked at only a 1% surcharge on payroll tax. And if you look at that relative to what people are paying for their medical schemes, it's much less in terms of the package of services that people will be entitled to. So clearly, there is an opportunity for South Africans who are on medical schemes to pay a much lower level in terms of the NHI relative to what they're incurring currently. Thanks, Minister. I think those were the key questions. I wasn't sure about this.
Thank you. DM, which one are you answering? Okay.
I think the question is fairly, in a way, related, but I'll come back just a short comment on what Anban has already said. But the question about the expenditure on GDP, in fact, that is really at the core of the need for reform. I think Rajesh mentioned earlier on about an example of the US where they're spending about 17% of the GDP with very poor outcomes, with only 50% of the population covered. In our case, we acknowledge the fact that in terms of average GDP spending, we're much higher than countries, as you said, with much better outcome. I mean, at 8.5% of GDP spending. But the reason why, there are a lot of reasons why our outcomes are not comparative with some who spend less. The issues of inefficiency would be part of those. But at the core of it is the inequity of the distribution of the resources. Just in terms of, the figures are there for everybody to see, that the population which is covered, just over 8 million, between 8 and 9 million people covered by the current private medical aids, which constitute somewhere between 15-16% of the population. But at the consumption of those health resources, it's half of that, if not even a little bit higher than 4.5% almost of the total GDP spending. The rest of the public purely depending on what is appropriated by the fiscus, which is, the other 4% or so. So, indeed, once there is equalization in terms of the resources, we expect that the outcomes, will improve quite drastically. Whether you look at the facilities, the most obvious is also just in terms of the distribution of human resources. The public sector, looking after 80% or 85% of the population, if I know that the Health Professions Council doesn't necessarily keep a register of where the practitioners are based, but from ourselves as the managers of the public health, we struggle just basic specialties, especially, medical specialties, even in the nursing areas and other allied health professions. The bulk of those are servicing the 15%. So once there can be that equity, there will be more access to services and also to the providers of service, and we therefore believe that that will go a long way in terms of improving the outcomes, which will translate into a longer and, as we say there, a long and a healthy life for all South Africans. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Minister?
Firstly, let me thank all the stakeholders for the words of support. Indeed, I think it's important for us to acknowledge the fact that there's no going back from universal health coverage, and I noticed that there will be some who are more keen on dealing with the details, and others like Dr. Letlape did not waste time but to go on to the robust part of the debate, which is what this whole process is supposed to elicit. So we want to thank you all for that. The question around, Alex, you raised a question about registering to a facility. You can go out and say, Dr. Angelique Kutsie is my general practitioner, that's where I'm going to go. Or Tando Gushe Clinic is going to be my clinic. That's what we're talking about. We, at the moment, are going through a process of registering South Africans as beneficiaries to NHI, which basically has something that's got a central database that knows who are in the system. That will allow us so that the day you decide to go and see your grandma in Paris, then in fact you are able to say, well, I got a pneumonia when I was in Paris, and the system will recognize who you are because it knows where you know that you are part of the system. So that's what we're trying to clarify. very good question around the state of the state-owned enterprises, the concerns about corruption, inefficiencies in the system. I think South Africans must continue to raise those issues because they are real and we must also confront them. The reality, and I think Rajesh was the one who raised the question, the fact that there's corruption, we need to ensure that we create systems that will detect, prevent, detect, and act early. There must be consequence management where there's inefficiencies and corruption. And therefore, we should not fear corruption. We must fight and dismantle corruptions. And for us, the basis on which any system will work, any country will work, is when we have an aggressive fight against corruption to make sure that people know it's not tolerated. And in this forum here, the one good thing is that you have got stakeholders who have got no qualms in confronting government when there are issues that they are not that they are concerned with. And therefore, we expect that from different angles, not only within our own system, but also from our stakeholders, it should be possible to raise issues and report so that we must nip it in the bud. So I want to make a point here that for NHI, corruption will be a threat, and therefore we are armed as it starts to make sure that we deal with those situations, that we don't run into the problem as though we didn't anticipate. It's an environment that we can see. It's an environment the whole country is trying to resolve. It's an environment that President Ramaphosa has also committed to fighting. And so with all the programs that are going on, the commissions and so on, I'm sure we'll be all the wiser at the end. But at the end of the day, we must be able to prevent, to detect early, and to act. And those, for me, are the ways we must deal with it. Dr. Patla has dealt with the issue of the large GDP offense, and I think that I can only just say I agree, because that's how we're looking at it. And just a brief comment on Prinesh Naidu. First, a few things. What Anban has reported is talking about the discussions that are going on. I think we should wait until we get the Treasury to publish the paper, because they will publish the paper. Then you can have accurate issues. Having worked in government, I always get uncomfortable if I must start commenting about this tax, that tax, in specific terms, when in fact, even in this discussion, we had made it very clear that we will give broad principles of what is involved, but when the time arises, it's the Treasury that will come with a money bill that will have all the specifics of the questions we are asking. So we can speculate now and make comments on what the discussions might be, but the issue of the specifics at that time. Right now, between now and the MTF, we've got numbers that are already part of the budget, so we won't be needing new money for the next, for the MTF. And then Treasury has also made further estimations. We've released some of the figures before of what additional cost might come, as we deal with the rollout of the NHI implementation. But then at the end, which is what Anban is talking about, we have agreed that Treasury must then release that paper, but we're working all together on it. So whatever figures you've got, we should be a little bit cautious. My point normally on this issue is always that the cost of saving South Africans from dying of diseases that the system should have been able to cure has also never been calculated. So sometimes you get a bit of a sensational angle to the report that says, oh yeah, it can't be it's not affordable. But if you got a medical aid and you can afford a medical aid, and you can then get through treatment because you can afford it, we don't see the injustice of taking away the opportunity for the one who hasn't got ability to pay to be able to get the same access to health as a right. And so there has to be a balance on how we deal with it. And I think the way that Dr. Patla has put it's important as well. I think a few other stakeholders also raised the issue of how you've got unevenness in a pool that should have been able to service more South Africans or all South Africans. But the way we've managed it, it has actually been a privileged few who have got access to a higher level of health care. Now that's perpetuating inequality, and we have to resolve it. And South Africans must face up to the fact that we are in one country, one health system, and therefore we need to share the resources, and that's really what NHI is all about. If I can just leave it at that for now, I hope it covers some of your questions. I also don't believe that we'll answer all the questions because you're going to be going out into public comments, and so we will note some of the questions. You don't necessarily need to answer all of the questions. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll take another round of 3+1 questions. I'll start with the plus one. We have a question from Tamar at the TISO Blackstock Group. Given the tight fiscal environment and the weak state of the economy, the government has very limited scope to raise extra resources through the measures sketched in the bill, such as raising taxes. Doesn't this put a damper on the government's ambitions for realizing universal health coverage? Her second question is, given the limited resources at the government's disposal, what would you say are your top priorities for the next stage of NHI? Where do you think you can get the best bang for your buck? Nice question. And the third question, you have previously indicated Treasury is working on a financing paper. Can you provide an update on that? And that was one question from the WhatsApp group, and we will now take questions from the Warm Body group. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Buleli Treaty from ETV News. I just wanted to ask, can we please just, if possible, get a clear breakdown of where the funding will be coming from? Because I think that's a very important question as well, just for transparency's sakes. Thank you.
Second question, gentleman over there, and then.
Good morning. My name is Sifas Chikanda from a group called Power Health. Minister, there is a constant way that I keep hearing that constant in the bill. The question of proximity, the question of equity, the question of choice. I almost get the sense that the bill is sort of like framed in an urban-centric approach. I think the majority of the most disadvantaged South Africans are in rural places. The question of proximity is actually not a given because access is a function of availability. So we still do have areas where services are not even available. If I may indulge you, a few years ago as a young physician working in Bushbuck Ridge, my employer had a compulsory deduction for medical aid. And one morning my team was demonstrating to say, why were they paying medical aid? Because there's no place that they can use it. So we still have pockets of that in the country where people actually don't have a choice. There's only one facility or one locality where you access services. So my question is, it seems like the bill is a bit silent on how are we going to provide alternative choices, especially for the most marginalized. And I think Dr. Letlape, one of the things he was highlighting is where is the aspect of the bill providing even the developing of the private sector in some of these disadvantaged areas where the state is not able to enhance services. So my question is, where are those components that are focusing on areas where there's very limited choices and very limited availability of services? Because right here, if you look into urban areas, we have the Lives, the Mediclinic, we've got lots of private providers. But that's Gauteng and the metros. What's happening to the marginalized areas like the rural areas where the people are actually in need of health services? Thank you.
And thank you. We had a question on this side. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Mia Malan from the Bekisisa Center for Health Journalism. My question is for the Minister or for Anban Pillay. With the administration of the payments of the scheme, there will obviously be a lot of those to do, and I was wondering if you've taken a decision on whether you will use the skills of or the current medical schemes, whether you will utilize their skills in processing payments, or whether it would rather be done on a completely separate level.
Thank you. Thank you. Minister, yes, we're done with the round of questions. Are you going to tackle tomorrow's questions? Okay, all right. Thanks.
I think the questions relating to financing, I can try and answer them collectively. Firstly, if you go to the bill on section 49 to a Roman 1 to Roman 4, it basically outlines the financing and where the money will come from. It states very clearly that the appropriated funds from money collected in accordance with social solidarity in respect of general tax revenue, including the shifting of funds from the provincial equitable share and the conditional grant into the fund. 2, reallocation of funds from the medical scheme tax credits paid in various medical schemes towards the funding of the national health insurance. It states 3, payroll tax, employer and employee. And 4, it states surcharge on personal income tax introduced through a money bill by the Minister of Finance and earmarked for use by the fund subject to section 57. So there's very clear funding streams as to how the funds will be appropriated. But the funds will be appropriated through Parliament. So Parliament will each year vote what funds would be made available. The question about is there given the tight fiscal environment, is there an opportunity for us to spend more money on healthcare? I think the question is not whether we're spending more money, is whether we can take the money that we're currently spending and use it more efficiently, because the funds that currently South Africa is spending can certainly be used more efficiently. If you add the public and private sector spending, we're spending 460 billion rand on healthcare. And the question is, can you take that expenditure and use it more efficiently to improve the healthcare outcomes for all South Africans? So it's not about new money necessarily, it's about using the current funds more efficiently, and the bill tries to do that exactly. Thanks, Minister.
Dr. Kwina Tulare, Technical Advisor and Expert of NHI. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to respond to the question raised by Mia Malan on whether the NHI fund will outsource the functions of paying providers. The bill is very clear that NHI is going to be publicly administered. So what it means is that the NHI fund will develop capacity within the fund to administer all functions that have been outlined in terms of administration. So that function is not going to be outsourced. It's going to be an internal, publicly administered function. Thank you.
Let me just add on what Anban said earlier. I think the point we need to add, because it's a recurring point, and clearly in the public discourse that's going to be a major issue, the question of where will the money come from. I just want to emphasize the point that what is envisaged here is not necessarily looking at new money. The bill, as Anban quoted that section, talks about appropriation by Parliament. In other words, the current appropriation in the fiscus, it's already somewhere, 270, if you take all in all, the totality about 250 billion. That's what is appropriated currently through national department, through provinces already. Now, the expenditure in the private schemes, it's already upwards of another 200 billion upwards. What is spent within medical schemes, the road accident fund, COIDA, and various other, health expenditures. Now, that's why he's quoting a figure of about 460 billion rand. So, we're talking here about redistribution of existing resources. How do we, achieve equity in terms of redistribution of those resources, making sure that instead of the other over half of the resources, financial resources, covering only 15 to 16%, but is reorganized. So when you talk about, even in the bill, talk about tax, payroll, and so on, most of those are things which are existing. Those who are working already or having income already pay taxes. If you talk about payroll tax as well, I mean, you may not regard it as payroll tax because it goes to your medical scheme. But what is envisaged here is that those kind of portions, that's what I'm saying, if we support this and it works well, in effect, instead of your 10% of your income going towards your insurance, which is currently private, you may actually end up with half of that, actually, what you're paying to your private provider now. Half of it, because now you're pulling together, together with the fiscus. That may actually, what is envisaged is that there will be a gain to the individuals in terms of your actual final expenditure out of your income. So I thought maybe one needs to just re-emphasize that point, because the critics out there have got a dichotomy of schizophrenic approach, which says, you're going to just start something new, ignore what is in the fiscus, ignore what people are already contributing now, over 200 billion of private insurance. And it's as if this issue of the national health insurance is going to have to find completely new money, which does not exist. So I thought maybe, I'm sure that's going to be a better issue of discussion. The issue of facilities, rural, urban, true that in rural areas there will be, there's very limited access to various facilities, and part of that is the consequence of the skewed, development of, especially if you look at over the last 25, 30 years. If you go back just around those of us who started practicing the mid-80s and so on, a lot of what you have currently was not the kind of inequity which is so acute now, was not actually there, because even in a city like Durban, where myself and Dr. Mkhize trained, there was probably Dr. Letape and also Dr. Ganjo may remember, probably in Durban you would have, when they say private, we didn't even have a problem where our teachers left us halfway to go and work in the private, because there were very few. Probably in Durban only one private hospital. So we enjoyed a lot of attention by our specialist teachers, because they could spend more time with us without running around to various private facilities. And it's only over the last 25 years or so that because of increasing inequality. Now, when you implement a scheme like that, you have more resources to can even shift and get the services. You can't have, psychiatrists and psychologists in Bushbuckridge, because most of, if they can't be absorbed by the public sector, then they migrate to where the resources are, which is where the private facilities are, which are in your towns and cities. Now, if you have a centrally controlled resource, you can allocate according to the need. In other words, if there's, as we know, there's a need for mental health facilities in Bushbuckridge, you will then be able to say a portion of this must reinforce or put together new facilities for psychologists, for psychiatrists, also in Bushbuckridge, and there will be an allocation. Once you have an allocation in Bushbuckridge funded by a central fund from the NHI, your psychiatrists and psychologists will also go there. So that is essentially what we acknowledge the fact that at the current moment, because of the two-tier system, we are moving in the wrong direction, where facilities concentrate where there is income and resources rather than where there is a need for service. And we believe that once you have a central source which distributes the resources, it will go according to need. And where there are no facilities, the fund will have to fund facilities to make sure that there are such facilities in the areas where there is need. Thanks.
Thank you once again for the questions. Just at the point where Dr. Patla left, if you go to most of these countries, and I can give you specifically UK, Germany, there would be an area, say Central Pretoria, where you can open a new orthopedic specialist facility or practice. You can't absorb one more cardiologist, you can't absorb one more gynecologist, because in terms of the way the system is structured, it's saturated. But if you want to open one, you then maybe need to go to Mkungundlovu, where there's a space, there's a shortage, and so on. So when we are trying to understand our system, we must understand that there's quite a lot of abnormality actually. We tend to think that what people wish in terms of, I want to see a specialist, I want to get an MRI, is really how it works. It's the family practitioners at that level are the ones who would tend to guide, refer, and then move to the higher level. They are specialists in the field of general practitioner practice, and therefore they will be actually a very important resource at that level. Your nurses also will be playing a similar role. So at a primary healthcare level, to screen, to say where people need to be referred further, is a function of a specialist system or a healthcare system. There were questions that were raised around limited resources. Yes, indeed, the resources are limited, and I think the point has been made before that the fact that the resources are limited, we're saying let's just rearrange and share, but it doesn't mean that you must actually stop a program to open up for universal health coverage simply because you have got the economy is not doing well and so on. You build on everything that we've got. So the question was, what are our top priorities? We have said that we need to correct the system. We need to revamp the entire health system. One, the issue of staffing. We've highlighted this as something that we have got to correct immediately. The security of supply of medicine has been the other aspect. The issue of ensuring a good quality of care, we've actually put that one up. The reorganization of management and ensuring good leadership has been the issue. Infrastructure has been the issue. And so we are focusing on what it will take to get our system to improve to a level where it is suitable to get a proper national health insurance as a system to operate. So we are actually looking at a lot of those issues. A question was raised about the Treasury update. Well, I'll give you reference now of what is there in terms of what has been discussed, and we've had already the issue answered before, but just to say that there will be further update from Treasury. Let me link it up with the question that Pule raised. Yes, Pule, if you were to, when you receive this NHI bill, you will see not only section 49, but go to, at the back there's a memo to Parliament, to Cabinet, which we had to release with it. On the memo, there's an aspect that talks about financial implication. It details then the issue that I raised about financial implications. I don't want to read it for you because it's quite clear there. But what we have now, it's recorded there. And then the rest is in future in terms of the principle. So I think we should accept that there is transparency in the way the thing has been tabled. Then the other question about urban-centric approach, I think we must remain sensitive to the fact that there is obviously disparity in the distribution of our facilities. And indeed, we are looking at various options here. We need to be able to increase the numbers of clinics, community health workers, because those are our first line of access. But what we also will be doing is that we're going to be contracting general practitioners to cover in areas where you've got, we are talking about Bushbuck Ridge and so on, where you've got district hospitals that will have medical officers that will go out and support the clinics, and therefore they'll be the ones who will have the outreach that will help to link up with the people there. And both in terms of the general practitioners who might be contracted, as well as the medical officers who will have to do and to provide a cover at that particular level. I think that issue is an issue that we have to look at. By the way, we also have to sort out one issue of how to integrate the complementary health services. Your other practitioners, traditional leadership should be able to refer, excuse me, traditional healers rather, should be able to refer patients into the system. So I want to work on all of those issues effectively to be able to say we have to deal with that. The bill is not to cover everything that you might want to query about the health services. The question about space for private providers is there now. If you want to go and open a private clinic, a private hospital, you apply for it. If then you get a license, you can then go in there. Whether or not such a facility will be available or will be used by national health insurance, it's another matter that we'll have to get into at that point. It may well be possible that there will be instances where there will be a facility that NHI will contract simply because that's the best available in that place. But it's obviously we have our primary resource as the public health facilities. So the issue of what should the private hospitals be doing, I'm not sure whether we can actually argue that private hospitals can be are said to be the ones that will go and close a gap on the poor rural people, because currently they can't afford them. So we need to then understand that if it's a private hospital, it's a private hospital. But I don't think it can be counterposed as an alternative for poor people who have got no access out there in rural areas. If it is a private hospital, it goes there on the basis of the need. Generally, it's been up to now on the basis of a business model, whether in fact that will survive at that level. However, when we talk about, somebody asked this question about you got limited resources. We want to be very open in terms of how we will be looking at investment in the creation of our infrastructure. So we're going to be looking at, I think we did announce that we will be looking at creative ways and alternative models of delivering services to build our infrastructure and upgrade it. We actually think that it's important for us to say, for NHI, you also need good-looking hospitals. You shouldn't just say, well, it's going to be NHI, go to that hospital, the ceilings are falling and the floor is cracked and so on. Well, because it's NHI, no. we are going to have to build on our infrastructure. And when I was doing the budget speech, I actually announced that there's a team between Treasury and Health that is working on the alternative financing and creative model, financing approaches and alternative service delivery models. We're open-minded there. We won't be able to make a further commitment until at the point when we've got something concrete. So when we say we're looking at a collaborative approach, we're looking at what will add value to this whole system. That's what we're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are unfortunately running out of time, and we have to conclude this. But Minister, if I may, there is one question that has come from left field, which I just would like to address, and that is the SA Society of Physiotherapy says that, are we serious about rehabilitation, as none of the rehabilitation societies knew about today's meeting? And just from my side, I just want to say huge apologies, and I will ensure that I come into contact with the Rehabilitation Society so that they are in touch with our comms. I will take that question, but I will respond directly to the person that sent those answers once I've consulted with the department heads. So this concludes this morning's session. I'm sure that was information overload, but if there's just one thing that you can take away from this is one country, one healthcare system, universal healthcare for all. Thank you so much, everybody. There is breakfast next door.